Chapter 161, Vietnam Vet. The next day after I kicked Brock Lesnar's teeth onto the tear, my cellmate got transferred and I received a new one minutes later. A 6'2", 220-pound Vietnam veteran old-timer that bragged about every Vietnamese he killed. He bragged about how he would cut off their ears and put them on a necklace until the flesh began to rot. I despised him more and more with every word he uttered. He killed for the white man, but now the same white man got him in prison. Black man killed a brown man for the white man, he stayed free. Black man killed a black man for himself, he imprisoned. Killing brown people for the white people money. Now he trapped in a white man prison, flat broke. Dummy. I still let him have the bottom bunk out of respect because he was an elder, as I sat on the top bunk reading a letter from some of my young homies on the streets. Some of them were in elementary school when I came to prison but were now caught up in their own street wars. They were unintentionally inspired by me and were now catching bodies and attempts daily. I shook my head because I knew they had no future going down the same path as I did, and the prison system had an empty bunk waiting for them. Where our cell was located, we can see the TV on the tear, and BET Rap City was on. I stood at the cell door watching the videos to pass time while my cellie laid on the bunk reading a book. Then all of a sudden, he looked up and said, "Hey youngin', why you hogging the TV? I want to watch the TV too." I stopped what I was doing and I looked back at him. "Okay, you can watch the TV, Holmes." I went and jumped on the top bunk. I sat back and I just watched him. I think I'm gonna have to punish this old timer tonight. I don't like the tone of his voice. 10 minutes later, the food trays were coming. Our food came into the cell through the tray slot, so I jumped off of the top bunk and grabbed his tray and handed it to him. His response? "Next time I'll grab my own tray. I don't like nobody touching my food." My eyebrows raised so high they almost left my forehead. I nodded towards him. "Okay." The hostile tone that he used was enough for me to start plotting his punishment. It was obvious that he was naive to his environment and whose company he was in. Because of this naivety, I concluded that he must have been either new to the prison system or he just didn't care. Either way, I was going to rock him to sleep. He was about to experience a rude awakening. After we ate, I began ripping my sheets into 4-inch thick straps. I made 3 of them. He asked me was I planning on working out with them. I said yeah. I hopped onto the top bunk and began reading again. Because I wasn't on the floor, this gave him space to work out. When I looked down at him doing his push-ups, I realized that he only had on his briefs and his boots. He was almost naked. I immediately put my plot to crush him in overdrive. It was nothing left to talk about. I urged him to work out harder and do more push-ups, so he did. He was willing to prove that he could do 100 a set, so I urged him to do more. After he finished working out, he washed up in the sink and laid down. I patiently waited for him to fall asleep, and sure enough, he began to snore. I banged against the bed softly to see how light he slept. I banged harder and harder to get a response. He never gave one. I looked down at him and he was sleeping on his back. I banged again. No response. I knew from there I could take my time. The extra intense workout had knocked him out. His muscles were sore. He was about to go into la la land, literally. I kept my boots on the top bunk with me, so I put them on, tightened them up, and then hopped off onto the floor softly to not awaken him. First, I opened up my shampoo and placed it on the sink. Then I put my hard plastic locker filled with books onto the top bunk. I then grabbed the ripped sheet straps and threw them over him so that each one could hang down on both sides of his bed. I then crawled under his bunk, grabbed each one on both sides and tied them. One over his legs, one over his waist, and one over his chest. He was still snoring. It was time to go to work. First, I grabbed the shampoo and rubbed it in my hands to make it sudsy. Then I walked up on him and then jammed my hands and fingers aggressively into his face, rubbing the shampoo into his eyes. Hey, what the fuck you doing? He yelled out in a groggy tone while trying to open his eyes and free his arms to get up, but the straps held him in place as he struggled. His eyes were burning, so he began to scream and struggle harder while I began kicking him in his face repeatedly with my Tim boots. I stomped on his head over and over and over until he was losing consciousness. But out of the necessity for survival, he got one last piece of strength and was able to pull out from under the sheet, ripping off the straps. He tried to grab me and caught a two-piece, busting his mouth open. He then stumbled straight to the sink and tried to wash his eyes. I grabbed the locker filled with books and smashed it into his head, knocking him to the ground, and continued with my rain of kicks and stomps with my black Timbs. His screams alerted the Ninja Turtles, who came to his rescue. They ordered that I cuff up, which I refused. I would be a fool to be placed in handcuffs while my victim wasn't. They then threatened me with the fire extinguisher-sized pepper mace cane. I still refused. They then opened fire through the tray slot, spraying the brown foam all over the cell. I was already prepared with my face covered, but the chemical component still put me down. 5 of them, dressed in their teenage mutant Ninja Turtle outfits, then entered the cell and dragged him out and then locked the cell immediately. He was then transferred to the hospital. The beatdown was totally necessary. He was a potential pervert and a probable rapist, which is why the cops moved my cellie and then placed him in my cell in the first place. Any less of a punishment, I could have been on the receiving end of who knows what. To be placed in a position of kill or be killed wasn't abnormal in the prison system. Captains, lieutenants, and wardens puppeteering prisoners for entertainment was part of the program. They thought I would be beaten and raped for what I did to Brock Lesnar's teeth. But instead, someone may lose their job and CCA would probably end up paying another civil settlement. My street savvy, prison awareness, and chess playing skills gave me one more day of breath. I was transferred out of the prison the next day. I was 28 years old. I was placed on a prison bus going south and somehow arrived at Occoquan and Lorton again. It was on its last phases of a total shutdown within the next 2 years. I was expecting to go to another private prison ran by CCA in either New Mexico or Arizona like everyone else did. This was my 3rd time here. It was quite different. Almost all of the people who made Lorton were gone. It was a new set of inexperienced prisoners, mostly just coming from society, and they were amongst very experienced officers, so the officers now had full control. They didn't want anyone like me back on the compound to teach or influence these new prisoners on how to conduct themselves. Respect everyone. Mind your business. No fraternizing with pigs unless they are breaking the law. No snitches allowed on the compound, and if an officer attack one, they have to attack all. The prisons had less than 2 years left for a total shutdown, and they were eliminating over 300 staff positions every year, with at least 25 officers quitting every month. Pink slips were being passed out daily. Morale was at an all-time low, so most of them really didn't care what was going on. A lot of the officers and prisoners grew up together and knew each other in some form in society. The cool ones we sympathized with. The assholes we mocked. Their lives was just as precarious as ours now. The rug of their future was pulled from underneath them. The solid foundation of marriage was now muddy. The bright eyes of their offsprings made theirs glossy. The debt collectors were like mosquitoes in heat. Blood was in the water for the sharks. No new furniture for the townhouse this year. No school shopping at Neiman's neither. Vacations weren't on the horizon either. Just foreclosures and unemployment benefits. I hope that they could feel our pain because they were now just like us. In R&D, the officers separated me from the other 20 prisoners. One of them was snitching on 2 murders in Ohio and was sent back for protection. The warden then sent word that I wasn't allowed on the compound. I was the only one that got off of the bus that wasn't allowed onto the compound. I was then placed in a newly opened super maximum security cell block that was on Occoquan's compound. It had been built years ago, but because of the caliber of prisoners that was there, the administration couldn't even open it. It would have been burned to the ground within weeks. But now that everyone was gone, they opened it and acted like tough guys, putting people in it as punishment. First, I was taken into a room where they ran down 1,000 rules of what I can't do, but nothing that I could do. No talking, no yelling out the window, no yelling out the cell through the ventilation or toilets to other prisoners. Not allowed to keep food in the cell. All uneaten food has to be returned. Even dried cereal that I may save for later when I'm hungry. No visits. No this. No that. After they were finished, they only received a mean mug. And a response. Or what? Or you will stay longer. I laughed. We will see about that. I made sure to get a copy of the rule book so I knew which rules I would break. All of them. Within a week of breaking every rule, I was moved to DC jail. At DC jail, I had to have all of my property sent home, which I wished I didn't. I wished I could have left it to another convict. Prison decorum was whatever is on the inside stays on the inside. Leave it for the next man in the struggle. Sending it home or taking it home would only lead to bad luck. No one wanted to wear any sneakers or sweats in society that was worn in prison. But I had no choice. These places didn't allow this type of property. And I definitely wasn't going to let the pigs get it. I had a PlayStation, a boombox, cassette tapes, sweatsuits, 2 pairs of brand new Timbs, and 3 pairs of brand new sneakers. Fuck that. This was my 5th time at DC jail and I surprisingly made it to population. But I refused to have a cellmate because of my last incident in Ohio. They tried to force one guy into my cell saying they had no other cells available. I told the guy not to come into the cell or he would have to deal with my response. The dummy allowed the officers to push him into the cell, so I sent him back out with his head leaking. I was sent to the hole the same day I got there. The infamous Supermax block. South 1. Minefields in my mind. Minefields, this is mine. My field. This is mine. Minefield. The South 1 Supermax lockdown cell block was infamous for every civil rights and constitutional violation known to man. From not feeding the prisoners to no running water for the toilets and sinks to no ventilation to no showers or recreation to having an infestation of gnats. Didn't matter to me. I was 28 years old and had been in prison for most of my adult life, with a significant part of it spent in solitary. I was rebellious towards everything and everyone, but in solitary I found my peace, especially if I had my own cell. I could enter into my fantasy world of writing screenplays. I could focus without all the confusion and drama of everyday prison life. I could think I can draw. I can get to know myself. I can focus on what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, what talents I had, who were my real friends and who weren't. Do I want to start a family or not? Am I capable of ever falling in love? Or has my heart gotten too cold? I didn't know anything about women. To me, they were a foreign species, which was probably why my relationship with my ex-girlfriend didn't get far. They didn't like to fight. They smiled a lot and wore open-toe shoes. Total opposite of my world. Only time I saw my bare feet was in the shower, and I wore my tied-up boots on the way there. Open-toe shoes for a man was considered a sign of submission. How could one be ready for battle with their toes exposed? My mind was always in battle mode, while hers was in peace. According to my belief at the time, we saw the world through different lenses, and once she trapped you into her spell, her goal was for you to see the world through her peaceful lenses, which I wasn't interested in. I never really had a chance to get to know them, so I didn't think about them outside of sex. I didn't try to understand those complicated creatures. To me, life was simple. Get money, punish your adversaries, and follow no rules made by other men. My mind was everywhere. I needed the exercise. To survive, I needed a laser-like focus on whatever plan I conceived. I used to brainstorm almost to the point of self-immolation. I was exercising my brain just as hard as I was exercising my body. I read for 8 to 10 hours a day, worked out for 1 or 2, meditated for at least 3, and the rest was well-needed physical and mental rest. My days in a hole were filled to the point that some things had to be put off for the following day. At 23 hours a day locked down and 1 hour out of the cell, most times I wouldn't go out for the recreation for that required 1 hour for months at a time because I was busy. One time they brought a psychologist to my cell to make sure I wasn't going crazy. I was just fine.